All right, you're listening to the Maker's Quest podcast. I'm Brian Benham.
And I am Greg Porter. And today we're going to be talking about CNC techniques. And it'll probably not just be techniques, but overall kind of big theory stuff with CNC. Both Brian and I are current CNC owners. And I think, and I don't know if you want to talk about it yet, Brian, but do you want to talk about your CNC upgrade that's
Yeah,
happening?
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll let you kick off with that because I think it kind of puts us on an even playing field in terms of some of the discussion we're going to have.
Okay. Yeah. So my first CNC was a little desktop Piranha from Next Wave Automation, and as soon as I got it, I thought it was pretty cool. But that was like 10 years ago when CNCs were just starting to become more of a hobbyist, consumer-based thing that was affordable to hobbyists and garage shop things. And so I got it and played around with it, and then I very quickly realized that it's just too small and it's not really well built to do a lot of production stuff that I wanted to do. So then it just kind of became this thing that sat in my shop that I used occasionally to make a template or just to kind of a prototype a new idea. But then as time goes on, I've developed a lot of products that would benefit from having a CNC that I could sell. Um, as a product line. Like when I first started my business, I didn't really have a lot of interest in product lines. I just wanted to do custom stuff because, back in the day when I was working construction at a bridge construction company, I spent days drilling holes making the same product. So I didn't really have any interest in that. So now I have ordered, it's not here yet, but it's on its way, an Avid CNC. And the reason why I chose the Avid CNC is because the 2 foot by 4 foot will fit in my shop, and it's for the size and the money, it gives you the most options. So I ordered it with the fourth axis, rotary axis. The laser's out of stock, but hopefully that will be coming shortly after once they get restocked in. So that's where I'm starting from.
What spindle did you wind up with, Brian? Are you using a spindle or are you going to use a router?
100% using a spindle. That was one of the biggest drawbacks of the Piranha is that you had to use like a Bosch palm router.
Yeah.
And with that Bosch palm router, you didn't have any real on-demand speed control unless you dialed it down with the speed control on the router itself, but you didn't have any computer controlled speed control. And then, so it wasn't as good of a cut or as smooth of a cut. And most importantly, I burned up 3 routers trying to run it
Mhm.
as a production machine. So it just wasn't rigid enough. So the spindle that I got was the 4 horsepower. I really wanted
Yeah.
the 8, but that was above the budget.
Yeah, there's a pretty marked difference between
Yeah.
4 and 8 horsepower when it comes to cost. And that's interesting. I've been running, and Brian knew this, I think, when he ordered his machine. I've been running the 2x4 Avid, which I think their numbers is it's a Pro 4824. I
Something
think
like that. Yeah.
I think that's their language, not mine. But I've been running it with a Bora 3.5 horse router since I got it, and reason being, I've got 6 machines in my garage that run on 220 volt, and I've used up just about every spot in my electrical panel to get 220 volts into my garage. So I didn't want a spindle that was going to demand that kind of voltage. That is going to change. They recently announced an auto tool changing spindle. I think it was maybe last week. It's very, very recent. And they announced the 7 horsepower or 8 horsepower, maybe 10 horsepower version of that. They're going to release a 4 horsepower auto tool changing spindle in the spring. And so
Hmm.
I think I'm gonna swap over to that in the spring.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to save my money up because that was one of the things that kind of took me a little while to decide if I wanted to do it, but everybody that had a spindle changer was just out of my budget. But there's so many things that I want to automate to be
Yeah.
able to do a roughing pass or switch out tools and things.
And the thing I would say about that, you don't even really need it to auto tool change. What's great about it is it has what they call a power drawbar, right? So you can take the tool out with the push of a button. So you push the button, the pneumatic clamp releases or the drawbar releases and the tool comes out, you put in your other tool, they're always at the same height. There's no adjustment in height as it goes, where, when you have a manual spindle, you're using wrenches to take the bit out and maybe changing over your collet or other things, where the auto tool changer, it goes back at the same exact height every single time. It's repeatable to, I don't know if it's a half a thousandths, it's probably less than that. It's probably close to a tenth. So extraordinarily accurate, where now every time I change tools, and I think you'll be in this boat too, you'll have a touch off that you have to do to set the Z height for that tool.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you about that. So now, I saw you share a post on your Instagram where you're using a jig that sits inside, or some kind of fixture that sits inside. Does that auto touch off help you zero your X and Y too, or like how do you refine exactly where
Yeah.
that jig is at?
So yeah, this is in that CNC techniques. Let's start there. I am a firm believer in fixtures and jigs for anything that you're doing production work on. And when I say production work, let's just say more than four parts that are identical. Now, sometimes if you have a really hard to make single part, you have to make it just like any kind of woodworking, right? You have to make a fixture or a jig to hold that thing to to do whatever you have to do without moving. So, excuse me, on my CNC, I have a series. Most people have dog holes or clamp holes or other things like that to help them get back to a certain point. I have a series of threaded inserts in my waste board, and I have a drawing both in Fusion and in VCarve that is the location of all those points. So when I need a fixture, it always uses an 8x8 grid to hold that fixture down to the spoil board. And if I have a part that winds up in the middle of that 8x8, where a fastener might go, those fasteners are left out, right? So you only really need, in most cases, four to hold it down. Um, but I draw that fixture in Fusion or in VCarve so that I know the offset from the corner of that fixture to anywhere on that part, right? It's in the same model, if you will. So I zero on my fixture, both for Z height and for XY, um, XY, origin. There's the right term. So I never zero off the part when it's in a fixture. I always zero off the fixture itself because the fixture is always going to be in the same spot. Now, if I'm not using a fixture and I've just got something either held down, clamped to my spoil board, or vacuumed down to my spoil board, then I do find the XYZ of that part that I'm getting ready for. Usually that's some kind of a sheet good. It's not anything crazy. But I have parts. Here we go. Here's one of them. This is all done on the CNC, and it starts flat. This is hard to show, but it starts flat, and there's a path that goes around the perimeter and cuts the perimeter out. And then it stands up, and I have a fixture that holds 10 of these parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then it counterbores and then drills holes. So you can see holes drilled there. And all the parts that I have on my desk are always blem parts because these are the ones I use on a day-to-day basis. So you can see the holes weren't centered left to right. These are deeper than those. But usually if I'm on a fixture, I'm making several hundred parts. And so the first parts that I run, I look at them and go, okay, I'm off, whatever, 50 thousandths this direction or that direction. One of the other things is I want to get it centered uh, left to right, right on the center piece. This is off center. So I would run this part and then make adjustments. But I start with that fixture is my XYZ0. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah, so I got a follow up here because so on the Prana that I had used in the past, right? So like in VCarve, you can say top left corner or the center
Yeah.
of the part. So I'd almost always do the center of the part just because that was easy. But so I have my X on the center, but let's say I'm using a 1/4 inch
Mm.
in mill. You can't see the exactly the center. So do you have a solution when you're setting up your fixture? Because like let's say you take
Mhm.
the fixture out and you put the fixture back, it might not be 100% exact where it goes.
Yeah.
How do you re-zero that?
There's two things that I do. Um, and I haven't put them in. I just switched over to a vacuum table system in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And with that came a whole new spoil board, whole new layout, like all the things changed. But on my old spoil board, I had pinholes for 1/4 inch steel ground precision dowel pins. I had holes for steel pins up both sides of that spoil board. So if there was a fixture that I wanted located exactly in the same spot over and over and over again, I use those pins, those dowel pins to locate it. And those will get you under a thousandth of an inch of accuracy.
Okay.
Even in wood, they're that accurate.
Okay. So
And
go ahead.
the I'll also say now I don't have pins right now. I'm relying on 1/4 20 countersunk bolts to hold my fixture, and you have to have, it has to align to the uh, x-axis and be straight. So what I do on the Avid, you can set your jog to a thousandth of an inch. So every time you hit the button, it goes a thousandth of an inch. So I'll line up one corner with a 1/4 inch either pin stuck in my router, or I'll do a 1/4 inch tool. It doesn't really matter. And I'll get one corner located perfectly, and then I'll just cruise it down to the other end before I put the bolts in, and it will push the fixture so that it's aligned properly. And so I'll get it perfectly square that way. And then Avid has a really great puck that you can use that sets your XYZ. So it goes down and touches off to the Y, or no, it touches the Z axis first, and then it touches the Y, and then it touches the Z, and you tell it how big the tool is that you're using to do that touch off. So if you've got a 1/4 inch tool, you say, "Hey, I've got a 1/4 inch tool." It does the math for you. It takes off an eighth of an inch and puts the thing where it's supposed to go.
Okay, so let's back up here because
Yeah.
on the puck. So is the puck fixed someplace on the machine?
Mm. No. So you pick it up, and it's got we could probably find a picture of it, but it's a square, and then it has a lip that hangs down on one side. So you can push that lip up against the corner of your workpiece, and then it knows what that offset is. I want to say it's a 1/4 of an inch or something like that. It's a standard offset. So in Mach 4 or Mach 3 with Avid, they have a whole thing that's programmed in there. Hey, I'm using the Avid touch off tool. I want to center off the lower left corner. I want to do X, Y, and Z. My tool's a 1/4 of an inch, and then it will go through that routine on your workpiece. They have changed that. I think your machine is going to come with a different software. It's not going to run on Mach like mine does. I can't remember the name of the software, but it has a whole different touch off sequence that I can't talk. I don't know. I don't know what that
Okay.
looks like. Uh, I wish I
Well, I
did.
think that's an upgrade, which I didn't get. I think it's coming with mock,
Oh,
but
it
I don't
is.
know.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I don't know yet.
I thought for some reason they were just changing their overall platform away from Mach, but they may, if they're doing Mach, then you'll have the same touch off plate that I do.
Okay.
And it is super sweet. Like it is super nice. It just perfectly finds the edge every time, and it's good.
Okay. So let's say my hand is my workpiece, and this is the puck. It's got a lip on it, and it just clips onto the edge of my workpiece.
Yeah, I always keep one hand on that puck while it's doing its zeroing
So
so that
then,
it does not move.
so then this comes and goes dink, and goes over and goes dink, and then comes down and goes dink,
Yes.
and then it does its own calculations.
Yep. And then
Got
it
it.
raises up so you can move your stuff out from under it, and then you put it all away and hit the go button.
All right.
And it also Mach has it, but the Avid CNC, I'm guessing you got proximity sensors with your machine. Um, those proximity sensors, when you home the machine, they put that machine very, very, very close to the same location every time. So the machine 000 is very, very consistent on the Avids if you have those proximity sensors.
So is
Uh,
that what the when the gantry's coming across and then it gets to the end and it touches, it
yep,
trips that switch, it goes, okay, well, we're at the end.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's one thing the Piranha didn't have that I wish had because the number of times it hit went and it's not moving, but the computer thinks it is, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're like, ah,
And that can definitely happen on the Mach 4 has what are called soft limits. So once you home your machine, it enables or activates the soft limits. So when it gets within, I don't know if it's half an inch of those soft limits, it automatically starts to slow that axis down, and it will bring it to a rest right at the soft limit. It won't crash your machine, physically crash your machine. Now, I'll say that in one sentence, and then the next sentence will be, I've crashed my Avid before. So it happens. Like it happens to all of us. And it's because, you're driving a tool down into a part faster than you should, and it can't clear out material fast enough. So then it'll lose steps or whatever. But again, on all those little upgrade things that you can select on your Avid, they now have ClearPath servo motors, and those servo motors feed back whether it made the step or didn't make the step, so it knows if it crashed, and it just like stops, but it doesn't lose your relative or absolute location.
oh, maybe I think the ClearPath was the upgraded software thing, so that might not. So I don't know what I'm getting actually if it's going to be Mach 4 or something else.
Yeah.
But
If you
I didn't grab the upgrade for the ClearPath
Okay,
because it
so
was like
so
another $1,000.
yeah. Yeah, the ClearPath is definitely on their new software platform. Um, I don't know if they're NEMA. I'm guessing you did NEMA 34 motors or something like that.
Yeah, 34s.
Those are the right answer. They're fantastic motors. I have yet to find an issue with them. But anyway, yeah. So if you're using Mach, you can still crash your machine. It's still possible, but it's a lot harder when you have those soft limits on. Um, but yeah, so let's get back to technique. So we were talking about fixturing and jigs and like how do you get parts repeatable and those sort of things. And again, in the machining world, in a lot of worlds where you're making things, if you're making multiple parts, you have to make a little bit of an overage, as a setup part, and you do your trial runs. It's no different than if you're setting up your dado stack for rabbiting or something like that, right? Like you have to have a scrap piece of wood that you're trying things out on till you get it dialed
Hmm.
in perfect, and then you do every one of the rabbits for your project, and you hope you got them all and didn't miss any, because setting it up again, you can get pretty close, but it takes that setup. So that's the magic of the fixtures, and now like I said, I invested in a black box Cyclone, and black box is, I think, rapidly becoming the go-to for the home gamer. I'm saying home gamer, the small shop that wants to add a vacuum hold down to a smaller format CNC. So I added the Cyclone is really for about a 5x5 is the maximum size. So it's well overkill for a 2x4, but it's fantastic. Like I have yet to be disappointed in anything that I've done with it. And to stick this in there, this isn't a technique, but it's something I'll share with you, Brian, because I know you're going to run into this real fast. I don't. Did you see the pictures of the stiffening pieces I put on my CNC?
No, but the last video I watched was with the end result of using the Cyclone.
Yeah. So I added a central rib to my Avid CNC to hold the spoil board tighter because with too much pressure it would bounce a little bit and throw off the Z axis. I would get parts that were goofy in the Z axis. And when I get in there with my dial indicators and things like that, my z-axis is accurate within under half a thousandth of an inch. Like it's perfectly accurate. And then I would get parts that were screwed up in the V, and it's or in the Z, sorry, in the V, the V axis. I wonder which one that is. But I would get parts that would have mistakes in the Z axis, and it's like, where is this coming from? And it was coming from there's just a really slight bounce in the spoil board. So I added just two pieces of tube steel down the center of my Avid CNC, and then on the edges of the spoil board, I added I think it was 1.5 inch angle iron to hold the edges. That was one of the complaints I have. Uh, the Avid design does not hold the edges of your spoil board. So as you get in between ribs and over to the edge, there's flex, and you have to take that flex out if you want good parts. And since I did those two upgrades, the added steel, which I mean, $25 worth of steel, maybe $30 worth of steel, something like that. It wasn't much. I added those in the vacuum table. The parts that are coming off there are so predictable. They are perfect every time. I'm not, it eliminated the step down lines that you get sometimes with actual V carving and doing lettering and things like that from kind of front to back, side to side. There's no deviation. There was always just a slight deviation. It wasn't because I had an uneven spoil board or anything like that. It was because the spoil board had just a little bit of bounce to it. But yeah,
So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of people complain about the Avid is that with the aluminum frame, it's not super sturdy. So uh, noted, I definitely as I'm putting this thing together, I'm going to be looking for places that I might be able to add some kind of stiffener.
I can
Um,
send you pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll definitely help. And I also thinking like, like when you build a cabinet and there's no back to the cabinet yet,
Yeah.
it's kind of wonky like this. So I'm thinking that maybe I would just put a sheet of plywood on the back as a backer against the wall just to help shear that racking force back up.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far off onto the Avid CNC thing. I want to get back to just kind of generic CNC talk a little bit, but I'll send you a picture of the fasteners and roll nuts, roll in nuts, I think is what they're called. Uh, you can get them on Amazon fairly inexpensively, but they'll allow you to add that plywood without drilling holes into
Well,
your,
it slides in the slot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
If they sell them in bags of like 50, and if you get 50, there's a couple spoil board things that I'll share with you
All
that you're
right.
going to want to do. And so if you just get a bag of 50, it'll be enough to do everything that you have to do.
All right, cool.
So, but back to techniques. Let's talk a little bit. We mentioned V-carve, we mentioned fusion. I know you're a SketchUp guy. As far as drawing with your Piranha, where did you start the whole voyage into a CNC part? Let's start at concept.
So basically, I drew it all in SketchUp. And then with VCarve, like when I first started, I didn't realize that I could just bring in the SketchUp file. Um, I thought I had to export it out as a DXF, but VCarve will actually read a SketchUp file, so you don't have to go through all the hassle of exporting it out as a DXF. You can just bring the whole file in. So that's basically what I have done for most files. If you took my SketchUp course at the Wood Whisperer Guild, you know that all those little facets in SketchUp is a what do you call it? Uh, mesh. A mesh
Yep.
modeler will show up in your carve. So if you export it out as a 3D DXF, SketchUp will automatically turn those into curves for you. Little tip
Ah,
there. But yeah, so that's basically what I did is just brought in my file.
okay. And then you're using V-carve. There's three flavors of that, I think, right?
Yeah, so the Prana came with a VCarve desktop
Okay.
license,
Okay.
and yeah, that's
And just refresh my memory because there's like Aspire. Shoot, I'm gonna screw them up. But one of
yeah,
them is very basic, right?
yeah,
And
that's the desktop.
that's the desktop. And then the
Hmm.
next one, I don't know what more it does. Is it that it does 2.5D?
So, well, I think the desktop would do a 3D model, but you had to use pin locations. You couldn't do a fourth axis with it.
Okay,
With the VCarve Pro, um, you have the ability to do a fourth axis or fourth rotary axis,
got it.
and then also the desktop. The biggest problem with the desktop is it's limited to a 12 by 24 bed,
Hmm.
where VCarve it's you can I don't know how big you can go on the Pro, but the desktop was very limited, and then tiling wasn't real great with the desktop if you wanted to do a tiling operation. I never really
Gotcha.
it failed my first attempt, and then I wasn't interested in it enough just because I was frustrated with the size of the machine. I was like, screw that. So I never got into the tiling issue.
Okay.
And then Aspire, I can't tell the difference between Aspire and VCarve Pro other than Aspire, you get access to their library, which I have no interest in because I'm going to make my own stuff. I don't
Yeah.
care about downloading.
In Aspire, you can actually 3D model uh, things that you want to carve. Say you wanted to do an eagle, you can 3D model it. I think in the Pro version, you're limited to like a bitmap, so 256 levels of Z in image form rather than in model form.
Hmm.
I've got the Pro version. I don't anything that gets crazy. I I move to Fusion very very quickly because the tool set in Fusion is so much more robust as far as modeling crazy stuff. It doesn't the Fusion doesn't do VCarve does text and things of that nature extraordinarily well. Better, I think, than any other piece of software. And Fusion is very clunky in that way. It's not like hard to do text or anything, but selecting text, you have to select every single piece of every single letter, and God forbid you miss the inside of an O, in the middle of your selection. Uh, there's things like that that just it's not very user friendly with that regard. Where VCarve, if I have to put text into parts, I almost always do it with VCarve, and even combining G code files between VCarve and Fusion is a thing that I do uh, because because it is so much better. Some of those little features inside of VCarve are so much better than they are in Fusion.
Yeah, so I have very rarely do I draw anything at all in VCarve.
Yeah.
Just because it seems like it's like a terrible drawing tool, unless, like you said, unless you want to do text.
Yep.
Even if I want to do text, I'm pretty fluent in Adobe Illustrator, so I feel like I just have way more control over Adobe Illustrator than I do VCarve. So it's kind of my preferred thing for text. So the
Yep.
only thing I've ever really used VCarve for is just to lay out my tool paths.
Yeah.
That's basically how like I don't know like if you use do you use Fusion to lay out your tool paths, or once you draw in Fusion do you put it back into VCarve to figure all that out?
No. So let's talk workflow a little bit. If I'm going to cut a simple part, a rectangle with a hole cut out of the middle of it,
Hmm.
um, I try to use the path of least resistance.
Right.
That's a V carve operation. It's
Hmm.
very uh, I'll say two dimensional. You could call it even 2.5D. It does that extraordinarily well. Um, Once I get into VCarve, I want to start and stop the entire thing inside of VCarve. Um, when I'm using Fusion, I'm usually using Fusion for assemblies. So things that are made up of more than one part, or things that have to be flipped, or things that have to be very dimensional. Um, so once I get in the Fusion workflow, I tend to not leave that workflow ever. Because if I have to come back and fix something, which is always the case when you're manufacturing 100 of fill in the blank, you may get the first 100 done and you send them out the door and you start looking at it and you're like, man, that screw head is just in the wrong place. I need to move that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And so if you go from Fusion into VCarve, so to speak, which you can do, right? You can take sketches out, in they go. I don't know if you can do any pieces and parts of models or whatever, but if you go into VCarve and now you're moving a screw around, well, if there's another part of the assembly that changes, if one of my suppliers can't supply the right knob or doodad, and I have to change a dimension somewhere, then I have to go back to Fusion, move that thing that I moved over here. It gets to be too much to keep track of the revisions as it goes.
Hmm.
So I like to keep, once I do something in Fusion, I like to keep it in Fusion. Fusion does have um, the where the power of VCarve is. It's very simple. It it's not a one trick pony. It's a multiple trick pony, but it doesn't have a ton of tricks, but the tricks that it does exceptionally well, like just over and over. And when you set up a toolpath in VCarve, it is very simple. I want this line, I want this tool, I want it to take this many cuts to get to the bottom. And if
Hmm.
I need tabs, I want it to leave these tabs. And it does that. Or I want to you can even do multi-tool things, right? I want a roughing pass that leaves 5 thousandths of an inch, and then I want a cleanup pass that goes full depth that cleans it all up. Does that very well. Inside of Fusion, to get to that point takes a long time. Like you have to go through several dialog boxes to get it to do a 1/4 inch tool 5 times around the outside of something.
Hmm.
That said, you do have insane amounts of control how the tool ramps in or spirals in, or it's a different speed during the ramp in. It's a different this. Uh, it's going to cut in this way versus that way. I'm trying to think of concrete examples of what those things are. But the plunge rate versus the lift rate versus the clearance heights and all of those things. There's just infinite controls inside of Fusion that, again, if you're going to make 100 of something, it pays to put the time into that Fusion model, because if there's a small defect in manufacturing, you can zero in on where that small defect is and change it. Now, I said that the one thing that I will go into VCarve for is text. And that text, as long as it's located in the same spot over and over and over again, that and I do text out of Fusion, but if I have a part that's going to go through knowingly is going to go through several revisions. So um, a lot of my parts, and of course I can't find one here. Uh, I make parts for people who make guitars. So they're these very curvy things, and the curves have to be exact. And in the computer, there's no way to check that curve against a real instrument to see if it matches. So there's a lot of trial and error. And I'll go through and cut cardboard versions of things on the laser. So I'll come out of Fusion with a flat DXF file, cut a cardboard part on the laser, and get it as close as I can get it on the laser. Then inside of Fusion, here's the thing, this one fit. Okay, great. You start cutting it. Well, when you're cutting on a router, things do change, whether that's step downs or the way it cleans up or the spring pass that you have to run or the whatever it is. And so sometimes I have to make 20 revisions to a part before it's ready for sale. And selecting the text. Again, I don't have the examples here, but here we go. On these logos, you have to select each individual letter every single time and zoom in to make sure you didn't miss anything. So when you make revisions and it dumps your tool paths and you have to go back in and reselect that, it becomes a super pain in the neck. So,
And there's no group select to just drag across all the text.
nope,
Wow.
not now. If I'm in the design area of Fusion and I'm moving text around and doing things like that, piece of cake. It's all one piece. When you go into the tool path, it wants to know every part of every tool path, and you cannot select by window. You have to select on the tool path all the time. Fusion has no way to select windows of tool paths that I've found. And somebody will probably chime in our comments and say they changed it 2 months ago in the latest revision or something. I
Yeah.
don't know, but no, as far as I am aware, and I just uh, cranked out a new product last night that I think is going to get approval on Saturday, and it wasn't available to me last night. So
Yeah. Or it's hidden in six different drop-down menus that you haven't
yeah,
discovered yet. That's one of my pet peeves about software like Fusion. It's like it's just too much. It's like I can't. I gotta find the tool that I want right now, not eight drop-down menus.
yes. Now, all of this said, it takes a long time to get to your first tool path. Once you have that, you can turn that tool path into a template. And from here to eternity, if I know I'm going to cut MDF that's 3/4 of an inch thick with a 1/4 inch tool, I don't have to think about feeds and speeds. I don't have to think about the way that it's stepping down. I don't have to think about if I want it to be uh, multiple roughing passes and one finish pass. I don't have to think about any of that stuff. Once I get that material with that tool cutting in the way I want it to, that goes into my template library. And from there forward, I know I know when I walk into a cam session, when I hop into a cam session in Fusion, I look at the part and I say it's going to have holes in it, so I need my drills. It's going to have countersinks in it, so I need my countersink. It's going to have engraving, so I need my engraving bit, and it's going to have, a contour cut out, so I need my contour program. I can pre-populate the entire cam. What do they call that? Setup is what they call it in Fusion. That cam setup, I can pre-populate that with all the things I need, and then from there, all I have to do is select the paths that I want for each tool, and it's super super fast. And if I have a product that takes 3 different sheets to cut out because of the size, I can duplicate that entire series and then just go in and repick tool paths. And it takes an hours long operation into maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty handy. The closest thing I think you can do in VCarve is save a new tool and give it a new name. Like
Yeah.
you could have like 3/4 inch end mills at three different feed speeds, but you can't do all
Yeah.
the stuff that you're talking about.
And in Fusion, you can have multiple presets for each tool. So again, if I have a 1/4 inch flat end mill and I'm cutting aluminum with it, I'm also cutting MDF and I'm maybe cutting plywood with it or acrylic. Those are going to take 3 very different settings. And you can go in and say, tool number 3, my 1/4 inch, I'm going to have a setting for MDF. I'm going to have a setting, and it's just a drop down menu. Everything populates from there out, and it's super nice.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, as a manufacturer, if you're working in the same materials, doing similar things but different shapes and sizes, um, Fusion has definitely got some advantages there. But VCarve can be set up in much the same way in terms of templating. I know I watched Jay Bates do some insane templating stuff with dovetails and things of that nature in VCarve, and it was a little bit of a mind blower. I was like, I didn't realize VCarve was that powerful with regard to doing, parametric things like he was doing. I haven't gotten that far with it because Fusion, I'm often combining acrylic parts on the laser cutter with MDF parts, with manufactured parts, with fasteners and things, or machined parts that we make. And Fusion has the ability to assemble all those things very easily,
Hmm.
where VCarve doesn't really do assemblies. That's not its strong suit. Its strong suit is I've got these parts laid out on a sheet. I need to cut these parts.
So so even if you did assembly in Fusion, you still have to swap the material out on the table though, right?
Yeah, so
So
yeah, you have different setups. So you'd have a setup for wood, you'd have a setup for metal, and you can have multiple machines in your setup. So I could have an Avid setup, a Tormach setup, a laser setup.
okay. So
And
yeah.
And within each of those, you can template your tools so that my tools on the Avid come from an Avid library. My tools on the Tormach come from a Tormach library. So those feeds and speeds are completely different in those realms.
Okay. So I think my next question would be like editing G code. Like
Yeah,
I hear people talk in like CNC groups like, oh yeah, I edited my G code, and like in VCarve, I don't think that's a thing you can do. Is it?
it is.
Ah.
Yeah. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, vcarve can actually control your CNC, correct?
I have not used that option just because the machine I have is not contr is it comes with its own pendant. It doesn't have a way
Okay.
to really control it. If it does, I didn't go down that route. So, but there is when you set up a file, it says send to machine.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the sending machine. So if you don't do that and you just your save your tool path as a tap file, or I don't know what, everybody has different endings, but they're all sort of the same. Um, you can get in and edit that file, and it's just G code.
so I'd save the tap file and then open the file separately with something with a different software then.
Yeah, just like Notepad in
Notepad.
Windows.
Okay.
Yep.
So then I
It's
could
it's literally G code was invented in like I want to say it was like the 50s. This is a long no, not 50s. 60s? 60s. I'm going to say G code was invented or whatever begun in the 60s. So it's all text based. There's nothing fancy inside of a G code file. It is literally line by it reminds me of the old basic programs that I used to write on the Texas Instruments computer. It's just line by line. Do this, move the x-axis here, move the y-axis here, move the z here. Then do this.
okay.
Then do this. So when you step through it, if you understand just the basics of, what does G56 mean versus G55, that's absolute versus relative coordinates. Or what does an M08 mean? Well, that means you're going to control a relay of some kind, usually a flood coolant. There's a handful of those uh, that once you understand them, there's almost like a header piece, right? That says, fire up my spindle. You're in relative units at this speed with this tool, right? Like that's the header piece. And then once you have that going, move the x-axis, the y-axis, the z-axis, move the x-axis, y-axis, z-axis. Okay, cool. We're done with that. Now we're going to drill some holes. And there's a G code for I want to drill a hole so that it doesn't have to tell it go up and down and up and down and up and down. It just says drill a hole with this pecking depth. And then here's my XY location. Here's my next XY location. Here's my next XY location.
Okay.
And anyway, but that's how I do text in vcarve, and then I cut or copy that G code into the file that comes out of Fusion, and I can put it anywhere I want to. So usually I do my carving operations up front, um, because if you go through a whole CNC file and the last thing you do are carving letters in and it screws up one of those letters, you've just wasted the entire part. If you're doing lettering and carving lettering and it's the first thing you screw up, then you take the part off the table and put it in the corner and start over. You didn't just waste an hour.
Right, right. Okay, so I guess you kind of answered my question because in all the things that I've cut on my CNC, I've never even had an urge to go in and be like, okay, I need to edit the G code because it's not doing what I wanted. I just
Yeah.
edit my toolpath in VCarve. So I couldn't think of a reason why. And all these people talk about G code. I thought it was just because they like to brag that they understood G code. But
Eh,
I never could come up with a reason like the software's so good that
yeah.
it doesn't need to. But you just gave a really good use case scenario for
Eh,
using combining two softwares at their strength.
So, and here's another one. Anybody can use this one. One of the fun things, right? You get done with whatever carve that you're doing, whatever program you're running, And it seems like, at least in my world, you vcarve gives you a couple choices. What do you want to happen at the beginning and the end of this file? And one of the choices is I want it to start from XY0 and I want it to end at XY0, right? Like when you're done cutting the part, return the machine to this point. Don't just stop out in the middle. But that point, it seems like it's always in the way. So one of the things that you can do if you want to edit your G code is you can say, move it all the way to the Y limit, move it to the X left limit and the Z vertical limit. And so at the end of the file, every time it will push the machine back to the side and up so that you can get your part out and load another part. Now, if you're making one part, that does not matter. If you're doing 250 parts and every time you're done, with 10 parts on a fixture, you have to get out your controller and move to all of your limits, it becomes a pain in the neck, right? Just have the robot do it itself. So
Yeah.
you can cut and paste. I mean, I know my I think it's G55 is absolute coordinates. I can just paste in G55 X X0 Y24 Z what's the Z number? 10, and that gets
Uh-huh.
my machine out of my way.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's way better than what I'm looking at on the screen here for VCarve, because VCarve you can tell it when it's done the home position, like your Z axis, like take it all the way up, but you can't tell it to go to the other places.
Yeah.
At least not that I can see in the program.
But yeah, it's just that, and that's a simple, and usually you do it in two moves. I got to make that clear. First move is Z. Get the Z up out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
and then move X, Y. Don't don't do all three. You can do all three simultaneously, but that is a bad idea.
It's a good chance you're going to crash into something on
Yes.
the way.
So
Yeah.
Z goes up. Next line, X0, Y24. Yep.
Got it. All right.
Uh, all under that G55. So uh, I just do those by hand if I'm going to do them now. And actually in Fusion now you can put something into your setup that's not a tool path. It's just a G code segment, clip, whatever you want to call it. So you can type that into Fusion and then put it in your template library and use it over and over and over again.
Oh, that's cool. So you can just have a little tool library that says, all right, return it home
Yep.
each time. You don't have to
Yeah.
edit it again.
What do they call it? Do I have Fusion open? Oh, I do. Oh, this is great. Um, it's called a manual NC. And you just put that in there and type G55, whatever, Z10, enter X0, Y24. And then yeah, I don't have that in my template library. Now I feel stupid that I that I put
Oh,
it in my hand all the time. It's like, why don't you automate that, ding dong? But I
yeah,
will
it will.
now.
It will. Yeah. I was going to say tomorrow morning, that'll be the first thing
Be tonight. I'm
tonight.
staring at a program right here that could use it.
Yeah.
So I have I made a button inside of Mock that is, I call it it's the move your ass button, and it's orange, and when you click on it it goes to that location. So I don't have to have that in there. If I forget, I just hit that button and it moves my machine for me.
Ah, that'll
Uh,
be handy. Good to know. I'll have to do the
yeah.
same.
Yeah, when you get your machine, I'm sure we'll have a couple long Zoom calls
Yeah.
for me
Of
to.
me going, what the F is going on?
Yeah, I was surprised. I will say this. Am I an evangelist for Avid? Um, I'm not paid by them. They've never given me anything for free or anything like that. I feel like I've gotten an insanely good value for my money with them. They've been great from a support perspective, but the thing that impressed me most was I, the long instructions were fantastic. I got it all, wired up and together. And when I fired it up for the first time, it worked and it cut my part just like I wanted it to cut my part. There was no surprise, gotcha, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. They're very thorough in their instructions, and their machines are very well built. Well, you're the assembler, so they're going to be assembled as well as you assemble a machine. but I think the design of the machine is pretty robust. And then all of their custom aluminum pieces that they make, uh, they're really made to take abuse. Where you look at is it X Carve and Shapeoko and some of those things, you look at the thickness of the components on those machines, and they're not intended for stressful use.
Stress use. Yeah, that's where I got in trouble with the Piranha. Like I wanted it, like I made my design and I wanted it to pump out a bunch of them so I could sell a bunch of things and just have
Yeah.
it working in the corner while I was doing other things. But all of a sudden you hear this weird sound and it's dragging the part around because something flexed or the router burned out. And so it's the machine is going because the router's not cutting anymore. And like all kinds of just awful things just kept happening that if you took your eyes off of it for a second, it was over.
Yeah. I will say, I had a micro fire with my machine, and it was my fault. I was doing some countersink holes, and I had an area that was going to be carved down about a quarter of an inch. In the order of operations, I put the countersink before the carve, so the countersink was going, doing its normal countersink thing, but then going a quarter of an inch into the surface. And countersink bits will burn wood faster than anything else if you have them on high RPM, which I did. And it actually created a little coal, a little ember. And with my vacuum table on, that provided just enough airflow to really light things up. And so
Whoops.
I'm saying all of this. You can't ever leave your machines alone. Like, don't leave them unattended. You can do other things while they're working. Just be in the same space, because that was an immediate, like, I smell smoke. What is going on? Why would my CNC be smoking? It smells like a fire. Then I go over there, and that thing's lit up. It's
Yeah.
like, uh-oh,
Whoops.
what now?
So,
So
so I think that should bring us to a new topic or
sure.
of like finding resources. Like where's a good resource to find feeds and speeds for different machines?
There isn't one. And I'm gonna say that I wish I could say it better. Amana tools, with their bits, they have feed and speed charts. They have all of those things. Everything that they have listed says 18,000 RPMs or something like that, and then it gives a chip load in there. So the way that you figure out your feeds and speeds is by the chip load that your machine can handle. And that chip load is directly affected by, do you have a router? Do you have a spindle? Do you have a 4 horsepower spindle, or do you have an 8 horsepower spindle?
Hmm.
Those three different cutting apparatus will have different chip loads that they can successfully cut with. So that determines your overall maximum speed that you can, not speed, your maximum uh, feed speed. Good Lord. Your overall maximum feed speed that the chip will support, or with the machine will support. And the weird thing is, you want your CNC machine making chips, not dust. If it's making dust, you're dulling your bits, you're burning things up. If it's making chips, it generally sounds like hell. Like, it sounds like the machine is getting ready to come apart. But those chips take the heat away from the tool, and they actually cut a cleaner line, in my experience. That said, uh, I don't know. I always start off with 100 inches a minute on a tool. And I always make sure, if I'm buying a new tool and testing something out, that I buy two or three of them, because I know I'm going to break one finding out where the optimal chip load is. But I start at 100 inches a minute. I generally don't have too much trouble there. So it's a matter of just kind of listening and looking. Am I cutting, is it dust or is it chips? And if it's chips, I leave it alone. If it's dust, I try and speed it up a little bit. And
That's
and then depth of cut is another, like, I'm assuming you're cutting slots most of the time, because that's what a lot of us do on our CNC machines with wood. We cut a lot of slots because we're cutting things out. Um, that that has a massive amount of, um, not depth of cut, but not necessarily overlap, but it's using the whole width of the tool as it's
Hmm.
cutting. Where uh, if you're cutting a pocket into something, right? Your first run around the exterior is going to be that slot, but then you can say only use 30% of the tool width on subsequent passes. And that's a whole different ball game. When you're doing that,
So
now all of
that's
a
your
sudden you're,
step over then.
yeah, your step
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. You're using your words. I'm not.
Step over.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but step over and depth have such a huge impact on what's my cut speed going to be. And you go back to the Amana chart that says my optimal chip load is 2000ths or something like that. Okay, great. So then the question is, how much of a step over and how deep can I go getting that 2000ths chip load per tooth? And whatever it is, it seems like it's different on different tools. And Fusion kicks that out for you. It will tell you what that chip load is. It does the math. I
Hmm.
don't think VCarve will do that. You have to go through it manually.
All right. So there'd be like a manual calculation. I'm sure I can just Google to figure that out
There's somebody who has it on their webpage. I guarantee it.
somewhere.
Chip
Yes.
load.
So that's interesting because like you'd think like if I was a manufacturer of a CNC, I would have tested my CNC with different materials to at least give you a starting point to be like, all right,
Yeah.
here's our starting point. But I guess like if you're using an Amana tool versus a white side tool,
Yep.
even if they're both quarter-inch end mills, they could be different hardened steel sharpened at a different angle or
That
whatever.
yeah, that's exactly right. And the amount of tool that is sticking out below the spindle will
Hmm.
affect that too, right? The longer it gets, the more chatter you get, the more noise, and
Yeah.
more likely you are to have problems. And the one thing I will say, like, flip this around. Look at some of the Cam Master size CNCs, the big steel frame, big boy cabinet shop stuff.
Hmm.
They have, I believe it's Cam Master. It might be one of the other manufacturers. It's not ShopBot, but they have proprietary tools that they sell. And when I say that, I mean they're a branded Whiteside or Amana or fill in the blank, somebody. But they go through and test those bits because they know all of our whatever 9000 series machines come with this spindle, and they know all the components that are going into that machine. So there's no question that this tool in this material will perform this way on this machine.
With their
Period.
particular bit.
Yeah. So so I have seen speeds and feeds on websites where there are proprietary things, but I would say, for the most part, Avid is going to tell you, I think the maximum inches per minute is 200 on the machine that you have. So you start there and go, well, that's my upper limit. That's as fast as I can move. It may be more than that. It may be 400. I can't remember. Somewhere in there. Uh, maximum cutting is either 2 or 400, and then the max rapid I think is 800. But uh, they'll tell you this is the maximum cutting rate, and that's with their big boy spindle. So come down from there.
Yeah.
It's kind of that's been my approach, and I cut a lot of things at 150 inches a minute. That's with MDF and a quarter-inch bit, 25 quarter inch depth of cut. I'm going 150 to 180 inches a minute,
And is that at maximum spindle speed?
maximum spindle speed. Yep. And again, that's because those bits can go 18,000 RPM, no problem.
Hmm.
And I've never had an issue with one overheating or
Yeah.
that becoming an issue. But 150, now, when I get into some really tight corners will break bits faster than anything. When I get into tight corners, I might slow it down a little bit if I have something that's got a lot of dog bones. Are you familiar with that term?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. If I have something with a lot of dog bones, that goes a little bit slower. I will never run those at 180 inches a minute. I'll run them more like 120, something like that. Uh,
And that so to do that, you can't just slow it down at the dog bone. You have to slow the whole two path down, right?
depending on how you're doing it, you can. But yeah, it's better to just control the whole tool path as one thing. It keeps you more sane. I'll put it that way.
So I guess I could do the dog bone as its own separate tool path.
Yeah.
Or
You
that could
can
be a thing I could go in and edit the G code.
You absolutely could,
Yeah, there we go. Now
or
I found a use case.
or you can do a non-dog bone path for your roughing passes and get all the way down to the bottom, and then your last pass can be the dog bones at a slower speed, which most of the time you want the better surface finish anyway. So you might go at a slower speed.
Slower speeds. All right. So one other question I had. So let's say you've talked about like you do your roughing pass, and
Yep.
then so in VCarve they have like a cleanup pass or an offset.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it here on the thing. So oh yeah,
It's
they
called
call it,
final pass, I think, in VCarve.
yeah, they say do separate last pass.
There it is. Yep.
And then it gives me a box to fill in what my allowance is.
Yep.
So is that if I wanted to move over a tenth of a thou of an inch or a tenth of an inch, when I fill that box in, is it going to automatically calculate my rough in pass out a tenth and then it'll jump back to the actual tool path?
Yeah. So I would highly recommend just going through and putting like an eighth of an inch, 0.125 in that box, and then it will show you the different tool paths. So you can see it in VCarve what it's planning
Oh,
on
what it's
doing.
actually doing. Oh, that's good. So like an over
Yeah.
exaggeration.
Yeah.
So like if I wanted to see which direction it's going to move, I could put something big in there, like an inch, and see. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, and then the final pass will be over. Okay.
Yep. Because you can do negatives too.
Oh, so
So
if
stock to leave.
if I uh, if I mess something up and it's too big, I can just and have it take more off.
Yes, but I'm going the other way around. Um, if you have a part and you cut that part, and instead of 4 inches, it's measuring 3.98 inches, and you need it to expand another couple thousandths, you can go into the negatives and make it do that.
Okay.
And in an ideal world, you would fix your CNC machine so that it cut 4 inches.
Right.
In a real world where we're manufacturing things and we're not gonna go through and set up our CNC machine every week to adjust for whatever cutter compensation. I don't know, whatever thing you might have to adjust for. The fact that it's cold today and the servos are running just a little different, whatever. Um, but you can leave stock by setting some of those values negative. Um, and I can't remember all the VCarve language that they use, but you can go through, like I said, just over exaggerate what those offsets are, and you'll see exactly what it's doing. But I was going to finish that up. In a manufacturing world, you make that first rough part, you measure it, and you go, oh, okay, we're off by 3 thousandths of an inch today. I need to make this part 3 thousandths bigger. You just go in and do that offset, run your parts. Much easier than trying to zero out
Redraw
your
the part or
well, it's backlash compensation and all those. There's a
yeah.
lot. There's a lot there. The steps per inch is a thing you can control in mock. And I went through with a set of 12-inch calipers and got all my axes within a thousandths of an inch over a 10-inch dimension.
So you just cut out like a 10-inch square or something.
No, I did a series of movements on each axis with a fixture with that caliper clamped to a fixture so that it couldn't move. And what that
Okay.
allows you to do is you move one direction and measure it, and then you move back to where you started. And if you don't measure exactly at zero, then that means you've got a backlash issue. If you wind up back at zero, that means your backlash is good. But if your dimension is wrong, that means your steps per inch are wrong, and you have to go through and set those. Or
Set
your
the
accelerations are wrong. Sometimes accelerations affect things like that.
so yeah, in yeah, using like Piranha, you don't have any of that. Any of
Yeah,
the desktop stuff probably doesn't have any of that, but
no.
any of that
But you
adjustment.
Mock, well, Mock is a wonderful software for people who need to produce things accurately. In fact, the Tormach used to run on Mock software. That used to be their standard software before PathPilot came out. So Mock, whatever number, 3, 4, um, are quite capable of making high precision parts. So that's the level of control you have inside a mock,
Okay.
which is great if you have a machine that you want to do production work on and you're trying to do accurate things. And again, I always kind of point back, if you're carving names into cutting boards or uh, making four-leaf clover coasters or things like that that don't require precision, you don't have to ever worry about that stuff. If you're My world is I'm making precision guitar forms that that have to be right, and they,
Right.
when you start doing assemblies, your what do they call it? Error stacking, right? Like every time you have an error in a part and you
Mm-hmm.
assemble the thing, it gets harder and harder to assemble, right?
Right.
And so being able to eliminate as much of that error as I can is super important. I mean, some of my assemblies, I'll have 30 parts that get cut out of a sheet of MDF that have to be assembled. Well, if they're all off by 3,000ths of an inch, you know, you wind up with some wonky stuff that doesn't, to a customer, doesn't have a good feel. It's like, well, this doesn't feel like it's, got good craftsmanship. It feels like it's sloppy. And the difference between sloppy and not sloppy isn't much. It's a couple sheets of paper.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And again, Mach 4, Mach 3 also, but Mach 4 allows you to compensate for all of those things, which is super awesome. But again, sometimes you don't have the time to go in and edit the motor controllers in Mach 4 and you just want to add 3,000ths of an inch and you can do that.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So you talked about your Torbach. I'm assuming your Torbach has a fourth axis.
It does not.
Oh, it does not. So I
No,
thought yours turned. Does it not have a rotary?
I don't have a fourth axis on any of my machines. I That doesn't mean I don't want one.
Okay.
But no, I currently don't. If I'm going to do turning items on my Tormach, I have a three jaw chuck that fits into my spindle, and I can mount turning tools into my vise,
Okay.
which is called mill turning, I believe is the term for that. But I don't have a fourth. I want one, but I don't have one.
Okay. All right. So I don't then I don't know that we have much to talk about on that because I ordered one and I'm gonna figure out how to use it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm super jealous. There's a whole pile of things in my head that would do really well on a fourth axis.
Yeah, that
So,
I'm more excited about the fourth axis, and that's one of the things when I talked to Avid that they were like, yeah, on a 2x4 machine that rotary table, that rotary piece is going to take a lot of your available space, so you're not going to have a lot of room." And I thought, well, 90% of my ideas are for the fourth axis,
okay.
so I'm like, okay, I might have to come up with a slick way to pop it in and out and re-register it real quick.
Yeah. I would put it on pins, dowel pins, and some kind of bolt, but I'd have to see it first.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
have two mounting options. One is to mount it in the frame, and one to mount it on top of your spoil board. And I
okay.
opted to mount it in the frame because
Oh.
then you have more, you can put bigger pieces in there.
Mm,
I may regret that if I turns out I don't need that much bigger piece or space.
yeah.
But
Yeah. I don't know. That's my answer for things that have to be precision located is always dowel pins.
dowel
That
pins.
th those will save your life,
Yeah,
and they're
and
they're
I'm
easy to.
sure that I could figure out some mounting mechanism if I wanted to just mount my because I think it looks like it comes with a frame that slides inside the
Mhm.
frame that I could just mount that frame on top um, with my own
Hmm.
manufacturing thoughts.
I've seen. I want to say Frank Hallworth has the fourth axis, so I know I've. If I haven't, if it's not him that I've seen. There's somebody else that I've seen with
Jay
it.
Bates has one.
Jay does. Okay.
Yeah.
The one thing, and I don't know if your spindle will be able to do it, but I was able to put a vertical spoil board on my machine because I use the router hangs off. Like when you zero the machine out, the router hangs off a solid inch. It might be a little more than that,
Hmm.
inch and a half, maybe. Um, there's part of me that's like, how far could you? Get that to, could you get it far enough that it could center line on that fourth axis? But that's,
All
I don't
right.
know.
So when it hang, yeah, and there's a big space in the back too that looks
Yes.
like there's nothing. I don't know how far the machine will go back. It won't go back far enough, probably.
No, no. I
Yeah.
hate to burst that bubble. I look at that space back there. It's like it's significant. It's like 16 inches or something. And every time I run my machine, I look at it. I'm like, I just wish I could use that space to cut. But
Yeah.
that's where the width of the depth of the gantry sits in there. That gantry is large. It's probably 12 inches plus.
Yeah. Now, would you be able to fit a tool changer back there?
So that's kind of where my mind is going with the tool changers, that I would have a pneumatic tool changer. So it would sit back there, and then when you were ready to change tools, it would slide out on an
Okay.
actuator.
So when I was reading, yeah, I was reading on Avid's site. They don't have a lot of information up about their tool changer yet.
Right.
But it sounds like that's going to be the thing that it would pop forward and back, and that might be
Yeah.
the space where it's just stored until you're
The
ready to go.
the one thing that concerns me is when you get into that situation, the distance between the gantry and the spoil board, I believe, is 8 inches.
Hmm.
And I've now got a vacuum table which takes up an inch and a half. So now I'm at 6.5 inches. Well, then what's the length of a tool, right? Most tools are somewhere in the 2.5 to 3 inch range.
Hmm.
So then you have a tool holder that goes with the automatic tool changer that has a, whatever the cone on top. I don't know if I can slide. I don't know if I have enough room to slide those tools in anymore. Um,
Yeah. Though, so they do sell an extension kit to move you from 8 to 12.
okay. And I have my my Z, I have a 12-inch travel Z. So I would just need some kind, yeah, I'd need the spacers to go up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that might be the
So
answer.
that
Like
might be the
everybody used to
answer.
do to their old Delta band saws. That,
Bandsaws, you put that riser block.
yeah, terrible, terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Gets you if it gets you where you need to go, I
I
guess.
I tried it. It just ruined the nature of the bandsaw that I had anyway.
Was it not secure, too wobbly?
Yeah, uh, all the tension from the bandsaw. I mean, those bandsaw blades are under pretty high tension,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it was just no bueno. It just got too. I've used a friend of mine had, I think, a Powermatic with that riser block, and it worked awesome. Mine just didn't get there. I don't know. It might have been user error. Let's blame it on that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the clock, Brian. We've been on here a little over an hour talking about CNCs, kind of going down all different kinds of rabbit holes there. Hopefully, for the listeners out there, that was fun to listen to and maybe somewhat educational.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, so I mean we talked a lot about Avon, just to say not sponsored, but they should
Yep,
call
yep.
us and hook us up with tool changers now. So that way we
Yeah,
can have experience with that and talk about tool changers in a
yeah,
future
yeah.
episode.
I think, well, I don't know where they're going to land in terms of pricing and availability and all those things. I'll have to take a pretty hard look at it, but like I said, even without it automatically changing tools, I think there's benefit in just having that spindle that can spit out tool holders and put them back in precisely.
Hmm.
So, um, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how spendy I get in the new year. Uh, but I've already made it known that that's on the list. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
All right. So do you want to take us out?
Yeah. Well, I'm Greg Porter. You can find me at Greg's Garage and Skyscraper Guitars on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
And I'm Brian Benham. You can find me all over the web under Benham Design or just my name. And you are listening to the Maker's Quest podcast. If you want to listen to any of our old episodes, they're all at themakersquest.com. Thanks for listening.